Blog Talk Radio.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Light Sports Ramble. I am Troy Otradovic, as always, joined with Evan Watallison. Today is our Super Bowl preview. Evan, I don't know about you, but all week people are asking me, who am I picking in the Super Bowl? On Twitter, on Facebook, who are you picking? And I'm like, I cannot tell you via social media or I'll ruin our Friday show. But were you getting a lot of requests?
Yeah, I was as well. I had a lot of people asking me, and if people were paying attention to my Twitter timeline this morning, I kind of did give away, who I think is going to win in my score prediction. But if they didn't see it, then hopefully they'll look past. But yeah, I've been getting asked that all day, all week as well on Twitter, Facebook, and just people I've been running into.
Yeah, and so I know we had Locker Room Magazine really pushing out our show this week. It's supposed to be at 5:30. We apologize. Evan, I can't believe that you actually had to get a life and do something that would interrupt the time of our show. So shame on you for getting a life. So that's all on you, bud. But with that said, we're supposed.
My apologies and thanks for being flexible. I hope our guest doesn't hate me.
Yeah, he probably will, because that is Cass's uncle. So, yeah, he'll probably hate you. But with that said, we were supposed to have Al Beam on the show.
Just smooth it over for me.
Yeah.
You guys are best buddies. Just smooth it over for me.
I'm kind of a smooth talker. I'm a director of a school. I got to be able to talk. And I host a radio show with you. So, yeah, I can talk a little bit. For our listeners, though, we were supposed to have Al Beam on the show. With the time change, he may call in at the end of the show, though, Evan. And we'll definitely get his opinion about the Super Bowl. If we don't get him on today, the guy has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to football. We can always have him on next week for a recap and see if that'll work out for him. With that said, what we're going to do, Evan, we all know the Super Bowl is in New York, Denver versus Seattle. The way we talked about having this show is we're going to talk about all four units. Denver offense, Seattle offense, Denver defense, Seattle defense. The key is that they have to have on Sunday to be successful in the game. Then we'll have some time individually to talk about how we think this game is going to play off. And then at the end, of course, we will give our prediction. And so for all of those Twitter listeners that were out there, today is the day that Troy is going to give you his prediction. But with that said, let's move right into it, Evan. We'll start with that high-flying Denver offense. What do they need to do on Sunday to be able to put points up on the board, bud?
Well, Denver's got a very high, as you said, high-powered our offense led by Peyton Manning, and then they have Wes Welker, both Thomases, Evan Decker, and Noshawn Moreno, Monte Ball. So it's going to, it's a big matchup for Seattle facing those weapons. But in order for Denver to pull points on the board and to win, first things first is they have to protect Peyton Manning. And they have to allow him to get to his spots when he's in that pocket, stepping up in the pocket, stuff like that. Peyton Manning seems to struggle when teams can get pressure right up the middle. If teams can get pressure up the middle and they eliminate his ability to step up in the pocket, he struggles. If he has to pull the ball back down and reload because receivers' timing is off, he struggles. So Denver has to protect them especially in the interior of the line. So the guards and the centers have to play their A-plus game against that Seattle pass rush, and they're going to have to attack Seattle in the slot with Wes Welker, with the tight end Julian. Is it Julian Thomas? The tight end's name?
Julius Thomas.
Julius Thomas. Okay, I knew it started with the J, but they have to attack with Julius Thomas and with Wes Welker in that middle of the field and try to get matchups on the linebackers of Seattle, force Seattle's linebackers into coverage. Because Bryce Irvin isn't that experienced in coverage yet. He was a defensive end in college, and now he's playing linebacker full time. So he's not that experienced in coverage. So they have to get their linebackers in coverage in the slot, deep middle of the field, because they're going to have a very hard time hitting Thomas and hitting Decker on the outside. So they're going to have to attack the slot, and they're going to have to protect Manning, and they're going to have to run the screen game with both Ball and Moreno. So if Denver can do those things, keep Manning upright, attack the slot, and play some screen games with Moreno and Ball, they have a very good shot of putting a lot of points on the board. And they have to score touchdowns if they get in the red zone, because if Seattle forces them to field goals, they're playing Seattle's game.
I agree with you. Yeah, not a whole lot I have to add right there, Evan. The one thing, and I think Thomas, and I had said this earlier against for the Broncos in the playoffs as they were moving through, that Thomas would be a key against the Patriots, and that is how they're going to beat Seattle. We all know Richard Sherman on the outside is a shutdown corner. They got great cornerback play. They got great secondary play. I think the bubble screen is what they're going to have to use to attack and to move forward. And that's what, if you remember back to the Saints game against Seattle, they tried it early. And if you remember, I thought that was one of the key plays in that game when that ball was dropped early in the game. That is what Denver has to do.
Yeah.
The thing is, I don't think Denver drops those balls. Denver can play the screen game. But you're absolutely right. They have to keep Manning upright. And this whole thing about Sherman and Peyton Manning throwing ducks, I could care less about the banter that's going on. Manning is a...
That was quite a funny exchange.
It was a very funny exchange. The one stat that I saw that is going to be very important for Denver is converting on third down. And when I was looking at stats, I was looking at NFL.com, and if you look at the game summary on the page, it shows you the season stats. I'm throwing season stats out. I don't care what happened for 16 weeks. I want to know what's been happening over the last couple of games. And this stat really stood out to me for Denver. They're going to have to convert on third down to keep the chains moving. And the thing is, they've been doing it in the postseason, Evan. On third down conversions, the Denver Broncos have attempted 26. They've made 16 for a 62% third down conversion rate. That is
very nice.
That is unbelievable. And so if they can continue to make third down conversions, I think that's how they're going to be able to keep moving the ball and be successful on Sunday, even with that great secondary play. But you also had mentioned the trenches. That offensive line really has to play well, literally like they did against the Patriots, because if you remember, I thought it was flip-flopped. I thought the Patriots' offensive line was doing well, and I don't think I'm going to go and jinx the Broncos and say how wonderful they are. But they played a very good game against the Patriots, got the push, kept the Patriots off of Manning, and that's what they have to do again. And they have to establish the run game. If there's one area the Seahawks can be taken advantage of, that would be in the running game. You can run a little bit against them. And so when I pull up the rushing stats, Seattle in the postseason is allowing 134.5 games rushing. So...
yeah, but you got to remember a lot of that came from Colin Kaepernick, and Peyton Manning is definitely not going to go running untouched down the middle of the field for 60 yards.
He's not going to, but I think they can establish a run. Denver has the offensive line, and they've got a 1-2 punch in Ball and Marino that they can do a 1-2 punch, because both of those bring a little bit different back and a different type of running style to that game. And it's all going to come down to the offensive line, like you said. But with that said, let's move over to the Seattle offense now. What does the Seattle offense have to do in this game to be able to score points?
Well, you had said it, I think you had said it best at one point earlier this week that they have to do some design runs with Russell Wilson, because we all saw how Kaepernick was able to kill them on assigned runs, like on designed runs. They couldn't stop Kaepernick. So if they can get Russell Wilson moving in that pocket and get some designed runs, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Anyways, they got to get Russell Wilson some design runs and moving around. I don't know what I was thinking there, but Russell Wilson can run, and they got to get him running, and they got to get him comfortable. Because against San Francisco, he didn't look comfortable most of the game. So if they get him moving around in the pocket, get him comfortable, and I think you had said the design runs with them. And if they can get him comfortable in the pocket, they should be able to move the ball, and they should be able to get Lynch going a little bit. I think Denver's a little vulnerable at the safety position, as you threw the stat out right before the New England game with the play without the gentleman that got hurt. So if they can get Wilson moving around in the pocket, get Lynch going, they should be able to put points on the board and score, keep Peyton Manning off the field.
Well, this is where I think the game is going to have to be won. Everybody's talking about that great Seattle defense. I think the offense has to come to play. You and I had talked about Russell Wilson kind of going downhill here in the last couple games of the season into the playoffs. And when you look at the offensive stats, and when you pull up just in the postseason, they don't seem to get a whole lot better. The Seattle Seahawks have only averaged 292.5 yards per game in the playoffs. And so when you're looking at that, this offense is going to have to make some plays. And how are they going to do that? Well, it goes to what you said. I think they've got to set the run up using the pass. And when we talk about the Broncos defense, the reason we'll talk about that is the Broncos have been shutting down the run in the postseason. Now, they haven't really faced a back like Lynch. So that's a totally different type running back that they're facing. They do have some injuries on that defense. But you wouldn't have been able to tell last week 2 weeks ago against New England. They played very well as a unit. And guess what the Broncos do very well that the Packers don't, Evan? They have gap discipline. They have very good gap discipline, something the Packers don't have. And so when I look at gap discipline against Lynch, he's still going to get his 2, 3, 4 yards because he's a hard man to take down. But if they maintain those gaps, he's not going to break those big runs. And so it's going to be very key to be able to set the run up with the pass. I think that's what Seattle has to do. Just like you said, maybe some rollouts, get him using his feet a little bit, because when you look at their receivers, they don't have those superstar type receivers, but Harvin should be playing this game. And so at least that gives them a little bit of a threat there, even though he hasn't played for a while. We'll see how he fits into the game plan. But if I was Pete Carroll, I would get Harvin involved early, get Russell comfortable throwing the ball, and that will set up the run. And if they can do that, it could be a very long day for that Denver defense. So let's move into that side. Denver defense. What do they have to do, Evan, to be successful in the Super Bowl, to shut down Lynch and to shut down Wilson? What are your keys to that defensive unit?
Well, what they got to do is they're going to have a hard time, I think, stopping Seattle's offense, slowing down Lynch, because Lynch, as you said, is a different kind of back. Now they have to, pressure Wilson and get him, having to make some very quick decisions. Because when the 49ers got pressure on Wilson, Wilson didn't react very well to it. And I know he had a fumble on the first play of the game when they were rolling him out of the pocket. And he had that fumbled snap later in the game. So he seemed a little rattled by the 49ers pass rush. So if they can get a pass rush going and rattle Wilson early and keep them contained in that pocket, they have a very good shot. And, as you were saying about Seattle's receivers aren't overly special. What they're going to have to do, though, is Baldwin can put up some big catches. They're going to have to find a way to contain Baldwin, and that slot is going to be very important to slow down, because I don't see Paris Lennon, former Packer, being able to keep up with the tight end Zach Miller of Seattle, and the linebackers are definitely not going to be able to keep up with Percy Harvin in that slot. So I see the Seahawks doing a lot of Percy Harvin in the slot. So safety play is going to be very huge for Denver. Their safeties are going to have to step it up, and they're going to have to contain Percy Harvin and contain Zach Miller. Because they should be able to shut down the outside. The only threat on the outside really is Baldwin. So they just got to get pressure on Wilson, and they got to force Seattle to kick field goals. If they can force Seattle to kick field goals, because Seattle's going to get their chunk of yards, I think, but if they can force Seattle to kick field goals, if Denver goes down and scores a touchdown, it's going to be very hard for Seattle to stay in that football game.
I agree. It comes down to the old adage that kicking field goals is not going to win you a game. And I think it's key for that Denver defense, which they've done a very good job at, is being able to force people into that situation of kicking field goals and fourth down. They did it against the Patriots. How many fourth downs did the Patriots have to attempt? You know, I can't remember. I can't remember off the top of my head. But when you look at the Denver defense, they've only allowed 33 points in their 2 playoff games for 16.5 average. Seahawks right there with them, 32 points. So we got 2 good defenses playing against each other. Like I had said, defensively, though, the Broncos have been shutting down the run. And if they can shut down the run and force Seattle to be one-dimensional, that is what they have to do. Because I don't think Russell Wilson can beat them being one-dimensional. Russell Wilson is very, very good when he's got the running attack working for him. And if they can't establish the run, it's going to go to exactly what you said. Red zone efficiency for Seattle. Can Russell Wilson allow the Seahawks the opportunity to win? And if that run is shut down by Denver, I don't see the Seahawks scoring a lot of touchdowns because you make Wilson one-dimensional at that point. And so I think their big key is to really be able to shut down that run and contain Wilson. And what I mean by that is don't let him get outside to run. Be able to maintain that gap discipline. Again, going back to that wonderful word that we always use with the Packers in a bad way. But being able to maintain their gap discipline because Wilson is their second leading rusher. And on the season, he rushed for 539 yards. That guy can get outside the pocket and extend plays and get first downs. And if they can slow that down along with the run, it's going to be a long day for that Seattle offense. But with that said, Bud, let's move now into the Seattle defense, which comes in, as one of the very highly touted units that has went to the Super Bowl. Very good secondary, statistically very good. But what do they have to do? Do they have to do anything different in this game against Denver to be successful?
No, I don't think they do. I kind of gave it away a little bit when I was talking about Denver's offense, about what Seattle needed to do on defense. We all know what Seattle does well. They press the outside receivers. They have 2 very good safeties in that middle, in Chancellor and Thomas. And they got a very strong pass rush with Michael Bennett, Bruce Irvin, and a whole host of guys they send after the quarterback. What Seattle has to do is get pressure up the middle. The defensive tackles for Seattle has to get a push in the pocket up the middle to force Manning to move to his left or to his right. If they can force Manning to move to his left or to his right, he's going to be uncomfortable. He's one that he needs to hit his spots when he's stepping up in the pocket, when he's following through on a throw, stuff like that. He has to hit his spots, and he's very based off timing. So if they can get pressure up the middle and he's not comfortable setting his feet in that pocket, his balls are going to be off a little bit. And if he's got to bring that ball back down, if he's going to throw, he's got to bring it back down. You're winning right there because if Manning's able to find the rhythm, well, he just drops back, steps up, throws, completed. it's going to be a very long day. But if he has to hold the ball a little bit longer, that's where he's going to start getting frustrated and start forcing things. And that's when you're going to see the Peyton Manning of previous playoff games show up, the one that seems a little out of whack. And he always seems a little out of whack when you get a pass rush up that middle and when you press the receivers on the outside. Now, if I'm Seattle, I put Chancellor on Julius Thomas. I put Chancellor on him, and I tell Chancellor to guard him, don't let him off the line, and run with him. Because Chancellor is big. He's about 6'3", 220. He's almost the linebacker playing safety. And then you have Earl Thomas helping out with any of the deep stuff, and Seattle, and also helping with any of the underneath stuff as well. So their linebackers have to be good in coverage, and their safeties have to bring their A game. But if they can get pressure off the middle, force Manning off his spots, and force him to hang on to that football, they can make Peyton Manning's day a living hell.
Well, I think that's the same key that I'm going to go with, Evan. I'm not worried about the secondary play. What I'm worried about is they need to get pressure, and they got to find a way to get pressure. If they can pressure Manning and get him out of that rhythm, timing, passing offense, then I think they're going to win. They're going to have the opportunity to do that. Because I do think, the comments I've heard, I do think Manning gets happy feet when his first and second reads aren't there. When he's got to hold the ball like you're saying, that's when he starts getting those happy feet. And he's looking and looking. And when you have that, that's when the Manning will make the mistake, because then he'll try to force something in there. And I think the Seattle front seven sometimes gets underappreciated because of the secondary play. But when you look at it, if they're shutting down those wide receivers, it should create some opportunities. Because if they've got to hold those blocks for 4 seconds, then like you said, they're going to make Peyton Manning's day hell. Because he won't have anywhere to go and he's going to have to force it in. I like your idea about putting Chancellor on Thomas. Chancellor's an athletic guy, a bigger safety. He can maybe nullify that security blanket, that check down throw to Thomas. So I like that point. I wasn't going to bring it up. You did. I like it. It's a great idea. Also defensively, the way that Seattle plays, when they're playing that bump and run coverage and up close to the line, I think that can disrupt any of those bubble screen type passes they're going to play. It might take Denver out of that strategy because they usually don't play 8 yards off the ball. Not like and I'm going to go back. I know I throw the Packers in here, but that's what I watch extensively. How many times, Evan, did we watch the Packers drop 5-6 yards off the receiver? Ton of times.
Almost all the time.
Seattle doesn't do that. So it will be very hard for Denver to set those wide receiver screens up. Now, could they do it with the running back? Yes. And that's where I think the linebacker play really has to be disciplined. They can't go all the way out and try to get into the backfield to get to Manning. Because if they do, then they're going to open up that outside or let up the outside containment, and that's where the screen pass will work for them. So I think those linebackers have to be disciplined and can't always be going for Manning. The other thing is, if they can make Manning, like you said, have to step up, that's where they can make their damage. So this should be a good ball game, Evan. We've talked about the 4 main units. Do you have any closing remarks, any keys to the game that you think will stand out on Sunday and be the thing that makes one team win or lose?
I think Percy Harvin's the X factor. Seattle hasn't really had Percy Harvin all year. And I think Pete Carroll and Darrell Bevell have something up their sleeve to unleash on Denver that they haven't seen all year. There's some design plays involving getting Harvin the ball in space, making him the focal point of the game. I think they got something up their sleeve. I think Pete Carroll has something planned, and I think it's going to knock Denver it's going to knock Denver off guard. Because Denver's obviously been preparing for him, but they haven't seen him much. So I think Percy Harvin is going to be the X factor in this game. Getting Percy Harvin involved early, and forcing Denver off of what they've been preparing for the last 2 weeks. I think that's going to be the X factor. And the other thing is if Peyton Manning can get Seattle to overreact to his cadences, because some of the stuff he just throws out there is just nonsense. Like, it doesn't even mean anything. Ray Lewis was playing the Colts many times when they were having, because Ray Lewis is pretty much the Peyton Manning of the defense, like the way he studied everything. When he was saying a lot of what Peyton Manning stuff when he was still playing is just gibberish. It doesn't mean anything. So if Seattle overreacts to Omaha or whatever and jumps off sides and stuff like that, then that's going to be key for Denver. Because if they can get Seattle to jump off sides, it's going to get them in second and short, third and short situations.
Well, I agree with the discipline on the defense. But I'm going to go back and I'm going to say this right now. I think special teams is something that people have to look out for. And at that point, when I'm looking at, and I threw the season stats out, and I'm looking at postseason stats. And when I look at two things, Seattle's kick return average in the post-2013 postseason, they're averaging 32.5 yards per kickoff return. That is some good starting field position. Now, I know that Denver has the kicker that can knock the ball out of the end zone, but they're now playing in New York in a cold weather game. So kick returns could be key in this, and even punt returns. How good is that field going to be? What are the field conditions going to be like? The team that can have the better return game to set up field position, in my mind, is the team that's going to win this game. Now, the Seahawks are doing great on kick returns, not so great on punt returns. And when I flip the table, you now have a Denver team that is averaging 22 yards per punt return, only 20 on kickoffs. So you've got two return units here that are capable of changing field position. And I think that is going to be one thing that the fans should look at. Who is having a better return game? Because when I look at the defenses, I think you got two very good defenses. I think that Bronco defense, and I underrated them against the Patriots. But they've got a pretty solid defense, even with all the injuries that they have on that unit. Offensively, I give the edge, of course, to Denver because of that high-powered offense. But it could be nullified because of the shutdown secondary Seattle has. And so when I look at it, it may come down to a big special teams play, not even talking returning. Is there going to be a special teams player that forces a fumble and a turnover on special teams? That's what I would look for. Is there going to be one of those? Because that could be the difference in the game. So with that said, Crazy Lady just warned us, Evan. 90 seconds to go. I know you've got an appointment to get to. Let's give the fans what they want. Your prediction. Who's going to win and what's the score?
Well, you know what they say, offense wins games, defense wins championships, and I think that shows up today. Sunday, Seattle wins 31-21.
Wow.
60 seconds.
I had a hard time with this one. I've debated back and forth. But I think it does come down to special teams and maybe a special teams turnover. And I like the intensity that Seattle brings. I think defensively, they're going to be able to go. They're going to man up those receivers. They're going to be able to shut down Noshawn Marino, Monty Ball. They're going to force Peyton Manning to get happy feet. I see Seattle winning this game 24-21. That is my result in that. So with 20 seconds to go, I know you've got to get out of here. But with that said, everyone, both Evan and I agree, go figure, like we do all the time. But we think Seattle wins the Super Bowl. With that said, we'll see you all at the next Red Light. Join us tomorrow for the Red Light Rant. We'll get back at you tomorrow. Enjoy your night, everyone.